Father blamed me for losing his job, then asked me for money while hiding that he was gambling again, forcing me to decide whether to help him recover or cut ties completely before his addictions pulled our entire family into financial disaster. I was 26, working as an HVAC tech in a small city outside Portland, and for most of my life I thought I understood my dad, even when he annoyed the hell out of me. His name is Rylan, he is 58 now, and for as long as I can remember he had this way of acting like every bad thing that ever happened to him was someone else's fault. Growing up, it was small things, like blaming my teachers when he forgot to sign a permission slip or blaming my mom when he misplaced his tools. Mom, Talia, is 55 and has the patience of a saint because she stayed with him long after most people would have packed up and left. I have one older sister, Miri, who is 32 and lives about 2 hours away with her husband and 2 kids. She learned quickly to keep her distance. I tried to stay closer, maybe because I was the youngest or maybe because I always thought I could help him change. That was stupid, but I didn't see it then. The day everything started falling apart for me was a Tuesday. I had finished a job in Gresham and was driving home when he called. His voice sounded tight, sharper than usual, and before I could even say hello he said, "You know what you did, right? You know this is on you." I remember gripping the steering wheel and wondering what the hell he was talking about, but I didn't interrupt him because he always got worse when you cut him off. He told me he had been fired from his job at the lumber yard where he had worked for almost 14 years. And he said it happened because I distracted him earlier that week when I stopped by his place to drop off the drill set he had asked to borrow. He said I kept him talking too long and made him late for his shift, which was ridiculous because I was there maybe 5 minutes and he wasn't even scheduled until an hour after I left. I told him that, gently at first, and he got madder. He said I was arguing with him, that I was being disrespectful, and then he hung up. I sat in my truck outside my apartment for a long time after that call, just staring at the dashboard and trying to understand how a grown man could twist reality so far that he blamed me for his own mistakes. But then I started worrying about my mom. She depends on his income too, and even though she works part-time at a clinic as a receptionist, her paycheck alone isn't enough. So I called her, and she tried to sound calm, but her voice had that tightness she gets when she's scared. She said Dad was pacing around the house, muttering to himself, and talking about how the world was out to get him. I asked her if she wanted to stay with me or Miri for a bit, but she said no, because she didn't want to set him off. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept thinking about what losing that job meant. Dad had struggled with gambling years ago. It started small, scratch tickets mainly, but then he found online poker and things got ugly fast. He drained savings, took out loans, lied about everything, and when we confronted him he swore he was done. He promised he would never go back to it. For a while things seemed fine. He got steady work, stopped disappearing at weird hours, and he even joined a community group to keep busy. I believed him. I shouldn't have. 2 days after he got fired he showed up at my apartment. He didn't text or call. Just knocked until I opened the door. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept, and he smelled like old sweat and something acidic, maybe nerves or fear. He came in without asking and stood in the middle of my living room like he was about to deliver a speech. He said he needed money. He said it calmly, almost too calmly, and that worried me more than if he had yelled. He said it was temporary, he just needed, a little, to get back on his feet until he figured out his next steps. I asked him how much. He said $1,200. I asked him what it was for. He said bills. But his eyes shifted off to the side when he said it, the way they always did when he wasn't telling the truth. I asked him again, more directly. He got mad. He said I was accusing him of something. He said I didn't trust him. He said I didn't appreciate how hard he had worked for our family. I stayed quiet because if I reacted he would explode. Then he sat on my couch and put his head in his hands and started talking softer. He said he felt like a failure, that he couldn't believe his own son thought he was lying. I felt that old guilt rise up in me, the one he always managed to drag out. I hated myself for it. I told him I'd think about it, and he left without another word. A few hours later my sister called me. She had talked to Mom, who finally admitted something. Dad wasn't just fired. He had been gambling again. He had been borrowing money from coworkers. He had been taking cash advances on his credit card. He had been lying to Mom for months. I felt this wave of anger so strong it made my hands shake. I felt stupid for not seeing it. I felt responsible for not stopping it sooner. I felt scared because I knew if I gave him money he would burn through it in one night. And I knew if I didn't, he would blame me for whatever happened next. I sat alone in my apartment that night, lights off, the city noise coming through the window, and I kept imagining two futures. One where I helped him and got dragged into his mess until my own life fell apart. And one where I cut him off and lived with the guilt of watching him crash. I didn't know which one would destroy me faster. I woke up the next morning feeling like someone had placed a brick on my chest because every thought I had kept circling back to the same ugly truth that my dad was gambling again, and he wanted my money to keep the cycle going. I tried to focus on work since I had 3 service calls scheduled that day, but my hands shook every time I picked up a wrench. At the second job, an older woman named Karina asked if I was alright because I dropped a panel cover twice and muttered something under my breath both times. I told her I was fine even though I definitely was not. When I finished my route, I called my sister because I needed someone who understood how messy things got whenever Dad spiraled. She answered on the second ring and told me she had talked to Mom again. Mom finally admitted that Dad had been disappearing for hours at night and making excuses about running errands. He had snapped at her when she checked the bank account and asked why there were withdrawals from random ATMs 30 miles away. That was when I felt something shift inside me. I knew he had lied before, but hearing the details made it feel sharper, almost like a betrayal aimed straight at me even though I was not the one he lived with. Mary asked me what I planned to do when he came back asking for the money again. I told her I did not know, and that scared me more than anything because I usually tried to keep some plan in my head. After we hung up, I drove home without turning on the radio. The silence made me restless, but any noise would have irritated me. When I got to my apartment, I saw Dad sitting on the stairs that led to my door like he had been waiting a long time. He stood up fast when he saw me and tried to smile, but it looked forced. I walked past him and unlocked my door, and he followed me inside without asking. He started talking right away about how he just needed that $1,200 to stabilize things, and how he was already looking for a new job. I watched him pace around my living room, and all I could think about was how many times I had seen this same scene when I was a teenager. Mom crying in the kitchen. Dad promising things he never kept. Me trying to calm everyone down. I asked him again to tell me honestly if the money was for gambling. He froze and stared at me, and for a moment I thought he might tell the truth. Instead he said, "I cannot believe you think so little of me." He raised his voice and stepped closer like I was the problem. I held my ground. He kept talking, and his words got louder and faster like he was losing control of them. He said his life was falling apart, and it was not his fault because he had given everything to our family, and now his own son would not help him. I felt a sting in my eyes, but not because of guilt. I was angry. Angry that he always flipped the story to make himself look like the victim. Angry that he thought I owed him $1,200 without giving me one real explanation. Angry that he could destroy his life and still expect me to clean it up. I told him I would not give him the money unless he agreed to get help. I said I would even drive him to a counselor or a recovery group. He stared at me like I insulted him. He said he did not need help and that I was treating him like a child. His voice broke a little at the end, and for a second I saw the man he used to be. The one who took me fishing when I was 6 and helped me build a skateboard ramp in the driveway when I was 12. I almost gave in. I almost said yes. But then I thought about Mom sitting alone in the kitchen pretending everything was fine, and I thought about Miri crying on the phone last year when Dad drained her emergency fund during another one of his disappearing acts. I took a deep breath and told him no again. He went quiet. Completely silent. Then he said in this cold and flat voice that he guessed he knew where he stood with me now. He walked to the door and paused like he wanted me to stop him. I did not move. He left without saying anything else. I stood there for a long time after the door closed because the apartment felt too quiet and too heavy. About an hour later, Mom called. Her voice shook when she told me Dad had come home and slammed things around before locking himself in the bedroom. She asked if I had told him no. I said yes. She whispered that she understood and that she was proud of me for holding firm, but she sounded scared too. I asked her if she was safe. She said yes and that he never hurt her, but worry still pressed into my chest because emotional chaos can be its own kind of danger. That night I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept seeing two different versions of my dad. One was the man who raised me and taught me how to drive. The other was the man standing in my living room demanding money he knew I could not trust him with. I tried to picture what my life would look like if I cut him off completely. I tried to picture what my life would look like if I kept giving him chances. Both pictures looked painful. When the sun came up, I still had no answer. The morning after another sleepless night, I drove to my mom's house because I could not sit around wondering what was happening inside that place. I parked across the street and just sat there for a minute because every part of me felt uneasy and I did not know if I was ready to see my dad after the way he walked out of my apartment. When I finally got out of the truck, I saw my mom standing on the porch with her arms crossed like she had been waiting. She looked tired in a way that hit me hard because she has always tried to stay strong even when everything around her was falling apart. She told me Dad had left early that morning without saying where he was going, and she asked if I wanted to come inside. The house felt smaller than I remembered. It always feels smaller when you walk into tension. She made coffee even though I did not ask for any, and she kept glancing at the hallway like she expected him to walk through the door at any second. I asked her how long she had known he was gambling again. She hesitated before answering because she hates talking about anything that makes him look bad. She said she started noticing it 4 months ago, when the savings account numbers did not match what she had written down in her planner. Then she found a receipt from a casino 2 towns over. She confronted him, and he swore it was a one-time thing. She believed him. I felt anger pull at my chest because it was never a one-time thing with him. Not once in my entire life. After a while, I went into the backyard because I needed air. Mom followed me and asked me if I could talk to him when he got home. I told her I had nothing new to say. She looked at me like she did when I was a kid and scraped my knee, like she was trying to decide if she should comfort me or tell me something hard. She said that she was worried he would do something reckless if he felt abandoned. I told her that was not fair to put on me. She closed her eyes and nodded like she knew she had crossed the line. I do not think she meant it in a manipulative way. I think she was scared. Fear makes people say things they do not mean. When I left her house, I drove around without a destination. My mind was loud. I kept thinking about how every crisis in our family always turned into a choice that someone else had to make for him because he refused to face his own mess. I went to a small diner near the river and sat in a booth by the window. I ordered a sandwich I barely touched. I kept checking my phone even though I did not want him to call. I felt stuck between 2 versions of myself. One who wanted to help him even if it ruined me, and one who wanted to walk away forever. While I was sitting there, my phone buzzed. It was my sister. She told me Dad had shown up at her house earlier that afternoon. He told her I had turned my back on him. He told her I did not care if he ended up on the street. He made himself sound helpless, broken, betrayed. She told him she did not have money to give him because she had 2 kids and bills and responsibilities. He told her she was being dramatic. When she said no again, he stormed out and peeled out of her driveway so fast her neighbor came outside to make sure everything was all right. Hearing that made something inside me settle. Not in a peaceful way. More like a heavy acceptance. He was doing the same thing to her that he did to me. The same thing he did to Mom. The same thing he had done his entire life whenever he needed someone else to carry the weight of his choices. I left the diner and drove home. I sat on my couch with the lights off again because I think the dark made it easier to be honest with myself. I needed to understand what kind of son I was allowed to be without destroying my own life. I tried to remember things from before his gambling started. I tried to hold on to the good memories. Him putting me on his shoulders when I was 5. Him teaching me how to tie a knot when we camped near the lake. Him cheering when I hit a home run in Little League. Those moments were real. They mattered. But they were not enough to erase the damage he caused. Around 7 that evening he called me. I almost did not answer, but I picked it up because some part of me still hoped he might say something honest. His voice sounded calm in a way that made me nervous. He said he understood that I did not want to help him and that he would figure things out on his own. Then he said something that hit me harder than anything else he had said so far. He said, "Just remember you made this choice." Not in a sad way. Not in a hurt way. in a blaming way. Like if his life fell apart, it would be on me. I felt my jaw clench the moment he said it. I told him firmly that he needed help and I would support him only if he sought treatment. He laughed. Not loud. Just a short, bitter laugh. Then he hung up. I sat there holding the phone to my ear even after the line went dead because it felt like everything between us had snapped. About an hour later, Mom called again. She said Dad had come home angry and restless. She tried to calm him, but he brushed past her and locked himself in the garage. My chest tightened because the garage was where he kept old boxes and tools and memories from jobs he never finished. I asked her if he was safe. She said she did not know. She said she was scared to knock on the door. I told her to call me if she needed anything, and she said she would. I did not sleep again. I sat awake on the couch watching headlights slide across my ceiling every time a car passed outside. I kept thinking about that last sentence he said. The way he wanted me to carry the blame. The way he refused to see any fault in himself. I knew something had to give. I just did not know what. I spent the next morning staring at my phone because every part of me expected a call from either Mom or Miri telling me something had happened, but the hours passed quietly, and the quiet felt unfamiliar. Around noon I drove over to my mom's house again because sitting alone in my apartment was turning my thoughts into noise I could not shut off. When I pulled up, I saw Mom sitting on the front steps with her hands folded in her lap. She looked smaller than usual. When she stood up, I noticed her eyes were red like she had been crying on and off all morning. She told me Dad had gone out earlier without saying where, and she did not want to call me because she thought I needed rest, but she was relieved when she saw my truck. We sat at the kitchen table for a while without talking. The light coming through the curtains made everything look washed out. I asked her if she was okay. She said she was trying to be, but it felt like the ground kept shifting under her every time she tried to make sense of what he was doing. She said she blamed herself for not stopping him when she first noticed the signs. I told her she was not responsible for choices he kept making on purpose. She nodded, but I could tell she did not believe it fully. People who love someone with an addiction always find some way to blame themselves even when they know logically that they are not the cause. After a long silence, she asked me if I thought he would ever get better. I wanted to tell her yes. I wanted to give her something to hold on to. But I told her the truth. I said that he needed to want help, and until he reached that point, nothing we did would matter. She put her hand on mine and whispered that she hated feeling helpless. Around 3 in the afternoon, Dad walked through the door. He looked exhausted. The kind of exhausted that goes deeper than lack of sleep. When he saw me sitting there, he stopped moving like he did not know whether to turn around or sit down. Mom asked if he wanted coffee. He said no and sat across from me. For a moment, none of us spoke. Then he rubbed his face and told us he had been at a friend's house thinking about what he had said to both of us the day before. He said he was sorry. He said he knew he had crossed the line. His voice was soft but shaky. I watched him carefully because I needed to know whether the apology was real or another way to make us feel guilty. He looked older than I remembered. His hands trembled a little when he picked up a glass of water. He said he had lost track of how bad things had gotten until everything in his life started falling apart at the same time. He said he did not know how to stop once he started gambling again because it became the only place where he felt numb. Hearing that made something inside me soften and hurt at the same time. He said he knew I thought he was using us. He said maybe I was right. He said he was scared of losing our family more than he was scared of losing money. Mom started crying. He reached for her hand and she let him hold it, but she did not say anything. I asked him directly if he was willing to get help. The room went quiet again. He looked down at the table for a long time. I felt my chest tighten because I did not know which direction this was going. Finally he said yes. Not because I asked. Not because Mom begged. But because he said he was tired of waking up feeling like his life belonged to something he could not control. I felt my shoulders drop because I realized I had been bracing for the worst. I asked him if he meant a real program or something he could claim he tried without actually doing it. He looked up at me and said he would go to whatever program I thought could help because he did not trust himself to choose anymore. Mom covered her mouth with her hand like she was afraid if she let go she would start sobbing. We sat together for almost an hour talking about next steps. We looked up local recovery centers. I called one and asked about intake. They had an opening for the next morning. Dad agreed to go. He asked if I could drive him because he did not want to walk in by himself. I said yes. We stayed at the house until evening. Mom made dinner and Dad ate quietly, but he stayed in the room. He did not shut himself away. It felt like a small sign, but it mattered. When I left that night, he hugged me. It was awkward and shaky because we had not hugged in years, but he held on longer than I expected. He apologized again. This time it sounded real. I went home feeling cautious because recovery is fragile and I knew things could fall apart fast, but for the first time in a long time I felt something close to relief. The next morning I picked him up and drove him to the center. He kept rubbing his palms on his jeans like he was trying to steady himself. Before he got out of the truck, he looked at me and said he did not know what he would look like on the other side of this, but he hoped I would still want to know him when he figured himself out. I told him I wanted him to get healthy for himself first. He nodded and walked inside without looking back. Watching him disappear through those doors felt heavy. It felt hopeful. It felt like an ending and a beginning pressed into one moment. Mom called later and thanked me for not giving up. I told her I did not know what would happen, but I hoped this time was different. I spent the rest of the day sitting in my apartment thinking about how easy it would have been to give him the money, and how that choice would have pulled all of us deeper into the same cycle. Saying no had felt cruel. Later I realized it might have been the only thing that forced him to face the truth. I do not know how his recovery will go. I do not know if he will slip again. I do not know if things between us will ever feel simple. But I do know this. I am not carrying his choices anymore. He is taking the first step on his own. For now, that is enough.